We've got 12 games on Tuesday night's main daily fantasy baseball slate. And a lot of times when you've got that many games, you've got a lot of options in a similar tier who could all produce similar upside. And I feel like tonight that's not actually the case, where I feel really good about one pitcher being above the pack, being a standout, even relative to 23 other pitchers. There are a couple stacks I feel like are in a similar spot where they potentially could separate from the field. So a bit of a unique slate in that regard, where I do kind of want to narrow things down and focus on those pitchers and stacks I think can separate. We'll run through which stacks those are, which pitches I like most, which guy I think could run away from the field, and get you ready for Tuesday night in MLB DFS. Welcome on into the solo shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research, our brand new site on FanDuel.com/research. My name is Jim Suttis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, here to break down the 12-game main slate for Tuesday, with locks set for 7:05 p.m. Eastern for today. Weather on this slate: there is a chance of rain in Washington for the Nationals and the Rockies, especially early. It should clear out eventually, but it is one to monitor. In New York for the Mets and the Yankees, rain is likely early, though it may clear out later on. They might have to have a late start, but they could play after that, potentially, depending on the timing of that rain. In Boston for the Red Sox and Braves, there's a chance of rain, though. Doesn't look too bad right now, so check back on that one later. And it is 92 degrees in Minneapolis for the Twins and the Mariners. Humidity, not terrible, but still very good hitting weather. So I'd upgrade batters and downgrade pitchers for the Twins and the Mariners. We'll dive on into top pitching options and more here in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, wherever you get your podcast. It is still called the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed because Number Fire still exists. Just our content is in a new place right now. Solo Shot, Heat Check, all will stay in the same place, and Solo Shot will still be going up over on the FanDuel YouTube page and over on the FanDuel TV Plus app on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and Roku devices. Make sure you find the Solo Shot wherever you consume that. We will have a PGA DFS podcast on the podcast feed later on today, previewing the 3M Open. We've got some exciting news over at Number Fire. Beginning now, you can find all the Number Fire content from the analysts you know over at a new home called FanDuel Research. FanDuel Research is on the FanDuel domain, meaning you can now do your own research on the same site where you place bets and submit daily fantasy lineups. And don't worry, all the Number Fire tools are still in place over at numberfire.com. So your daily process can remain the same for now. As a thank you for all your years of loyalty, we'll be running free rolls over on FanDuel Research now through the end of the NFL season. To check out this week's free play on the Women's World Cup, go to the Welcome to FanDuel Research article over on FanDuel Research. Again, be sure to check out all the great content while you're there. Again, that's FanDuel.com/research to find it. And the Welcome to FanDuel Research article has a link to the free roll for the U.S. versus Netherlands. Talked through that match with Dr. Ed Feng last night on Covering the Spread. Got his read on it and talked about some bets he may like over there as well. That's on the Covering the Spread podcast feed, the FanDuel YouTube page, and FanDuel TV Plus as well. So again, podcast stuff remains the exact same. Schedule's the same. Where you get it is the same. Just all of Number Fire's content now going up over on FanDuel.com/research as opposed to NumberFire.com. You can still find the heat map, projections, all in the same place at Number Fire for right now. Pitching preview for this Tuesday main slate. Blake Snell checks in with the highest salary on FanDuel at $11,000, followed by Andrew Abbott at $10,800. We got Merrill Kelly checking in at $10,500, followed by Corbin Burns at $10,300. Pablo Lopez salary is $10,000 with George Kirby at $99,000, rematch of last week for them. Charlie Morton checks in at $97,000 with Justin Verlander at $96,000. We got Aaron Savali at $93,000. Chris Bassett is $92,000 with Alex Cobb, Julio Urias, JP France, Kyle Hendricks, Domingo Herman, and Michael Kopech as the others at $8,000 or higher. Now, I was on Blake Snell last week, and it didn't go well because he walked 7 batters in 5 innings against the Blue Jays, and that was not ideal. Drove above his pitch count, didn't let him get deep in the game, didn't get a lot of strikeouts. But Snell still allowed just 1 earned run in that game. The results were still good, and I'm only back on him once again tonight. Despite the 7 walks, again, just 1 earned run. And part of that's luck because that's a lot of base runners. You don't expect to allow just 1 run in that situation. But it's also an indication of things Snell has been doing really well recently. Over his past 9 starts, Snell has been throwing fewer four-seam fastballs and more curveballs. And in that time, he has a 40% strikeout rate, which is awesome. You love strikeouts. But he's also allowing just a 22% hard hit rate. He has not had a single game with a hard hit rate of 40% in any of those games, which is so tough to do, especially when you're not letting a lot of balls in play because you're getting a lot of strikeouts. That's why Snell's ERA in this time is 0.69. Nobody right now is on his level in that regard, with tons of strikeouts and no hard contact allowed. Snell's facing the Pirates tonight. They have a 93 WRC plus against lefties with a 24% strikeout rate. It is a good matchup for a lefty. I have Snell projected for 9.4 strikeouts tonight, which is a massive number for my projections, but I buy it. I think he has to be the top guy on this slate, and the combo of strikeouts with soft contact is tough to match. So to me, when we're looking for pitchers who can separate on a big slate, Blake Snell is that guy for tonight. So to me, Blake Snell needs to be our top pitcher in MLB DFS on Tuesday night. After Snell, I think I have to put Corbin Burnes second. He's at home against the Reds, which is definitely not a fun matchup, but it seems like Burnes is getting back to his old form. And I think we should consider him here at $10,300. Burnes has had back-to-back starts of double-digit strikeouts, and that includes a game where he had 13. And that 13 strikeout game came against the Reds, which means they did see him back on July 14th, which is pretty recent. They also saw him on July 7th. So this will be the third time the Reds have seen Burnes in 18 days. And that is a big downgrade because familiarity, to me at least, does matter a lot. It helps, though, when the guys overpowered that team when he's seen them. He had an 18.6% swinging strike rate the second time they faced him. They also faced him back on June 2nd, and he had Burnes had a 15% swinging strike rate in that game as well. So they know what he's throwing. They've seen him 3 times already, but they haven't been able to hit it as of yet. Burnes has been throwing more curveballs his past 12 starts in that time, 28% strikeout rate, which is paired with a 29% hard hit rate. It's not quite Snell's level, but it's still very good. It's just hard to match what Snell has done. And I think that the low hard contact allowed does help Burnes' case quite a bit. If the opponent weren't as familiar with Burnes as the Reds are, I do think you could consider putting Burnes in Snell's tier. But that's not the case. They are very familiar with him, so I can't do that. So to me, I feel okay putting Burnes second. I think he's good enough to overcome those circumstances, but to me, that's why there is a legitimate gap between Snell and Burnes, just given how many times the Reds have seen Burnes, especially recently. For the value play, I'm going to wind up on Domingo Germán. He is definitely not a guy I feel great about. He's erratic. He could get ejected at any point for using sticky stuff, so that's not fun, but he has a path to upside, and I think that's enough to consider him here at $8,200. Germán is facing the Mets, which is a tough matchup. They have a 112 WRC plus against righties with a low strikeout rate and a high walk rate. And I very rarely use guys facing this team, but Germán is really solid. In 18 starts this year, his skill interactive ERA is 4.02 with a 25% strikeout rate. He's had some really bad starts, and those have pushed his ERA up to 4.52, and that could happen again tonight because, again, he's erratic, and it's especially possible given it's a tough matchup. But Germán has a path to a really nice game, and it's hard to turn down when his salary is $8,200. So he's dicey. He's not fun, but after Snell, I don't mind giving him a look. I think that Burnes has paths to disappointment too, so for $8,200, you could do a lot worse than Germán. And I think that he's kind of in the same tier for me as Burnes, where it's Snell, Gap, Burnes, Germán fighting out for that second slot on FanDuel for tonight. We'll talk about Pablo Lopez and George Kirby in things to watch later on. First, let's dive into the stacks and go back to that Padres game because I think both aspects of the Padres very fun for tonight. The offense is facing Rich Hill, and the Padres have had a bad year, but they've hit lefties really, really well, and I think they should continue to do that tonight. Hill has a 4.84 ERA overall this year, so clearly not a great season, and it hasn't been trending the right way either. Hill has been leaning more on his cutter over his past 12 starts with fewer sliders, and in that time, the skill interactive ERA is 4.93, his ERA is 5.14, and the batted ball data is not great with a 40% hard hit rate allowed. That's despite having a pretty good number of solid matchups in that time. We did see Hill face the Padres back on June 27th. He was fine that game, let up 4 earned runs in 6 innings, but they did have a 43% hard hit rate in that game. That success there makes sense because the Padres have a 129 WRC plus against lefties, which is the best mark on the slate. They have a 213 ISO, which ranks second. So I'm not going to stack against Hill all the time because he's fine. But against this kind of team, I will definitely be here. So the Padres, to me, the top stack on the main slate by a pretty decent margin. Ha-Seong Kim, double dong last night. I think that he has to be one of the better values in the slate. And this was true even before he went off last night. But he's been hitting leadoff against righties, which says the Padres trust him and want him in that spot, which is a good thing. And when you put him against the lefty, his ISO goes up to 248 with a 46% fly ball rate. He's got really good plate discipline data, and he will steal against lefties too. So might feel a bit point chasey to go Ha-Seong Kim after the night he had last night, but I think it's the correct move. So Ha-Seong Kim, to me, is going to be one of the focal points for tonight in MLB DFS, given he has 2 sources of upside and is batting in a good spot in the order, $2,900. He just kind of checks every box. Now, we talked about the Nationals on yesterday's podcast, and they wound up being fine. They scored 6 runs, mostly coming late in that game, but I think they're on the map once again today. They're facing Austin Gomber. Gomber is still struggling, and it's the point where I think we should stack against him on the road as well. But to Gomber's credit, it seems like he's starting to trend back up a bit. Over his past 9 starts, he's been going back to his slider again, and his skill interactive ERA in that time is down to 4.61. He's not walking anybody, which is great. So there have been signs of improvement. But not walking anybody also means Gomber's letting up a lot of balls in play. And that's where he runs into issues because he's still letting up a 45% hard hit rate in this time. That's why Gomber's let up 10 home runs in this span. And the road starts for him, even when he's left Coors Field, haven't been great. He's let up 11 earned runs across 20 innings. So Gomber's getting better, and that's good. I like Gomber a lot. I've used him in daily fantasy back in the day when he had that really good half season. So I want to get back to where he was. But the results, even on the road, have not been perfect. He's letting up too much hard contact. He's facing the Nationals tonight, who have a 110 at WRC plus against lefties. So I think they do make sense to stack tonight. So the Nationals, to me, going to be number 2 and third straight to show talking Nationals. It feels weird, but I think it is correct here once again. Within those National stacks, we got Stone Garrett. He typically bats in the middle of the order against lefties, and he has good power marks against lefties, but as with all platoon guys, we have to do some digging to make sure Garrett doesn't leave early for pinch hitters because that robs us of plate appearances, and that can have a big impact on upside. But Garrett typically stays in for the entire game. He has finished each of his past 6 starts. He has not left a start before the 8th inning since back on June 6th. So at $2,600, I think that Garrett is a mighty fine value play for tonight. Got some power, has some upside, and I think he's very much worth turning to here. So Stone Garrett, to me, a really good way to make a getting to Blake Snell, getting to Fernando Tatis in your Snell lineups a whole lot easier. Finally, the Guardians offense has been looking much better recently. Their WRC plus is back up to 99 against righties, and it's been below that pretty much all year. I think I've seen enough where we can consider them for stacking once again. I'm open to doing that today. They're facing Zach Greinke. The Guardians are. Greinke still struggling right now. He came out the IL last week and faced the Tigers, and just 1 strikeout across 4 innings. Let up 2 earned runs in that game, and it was his first start off the IL, but Greinke was struggling before that too. He's made 10 starts with fewer cutters, and in that time, Greinke has a 5.76 ERA, let up 3 home runs in one of those games, let up 2 in another, and he's largely gotten beaten up by better offenses than this, and he did face Cleveland in this time, and he let up just 2 earned runs across 6 innings. But Cleveland has been much better recently. They've been on the incline for a bit. Their WRC plus the past month is up to 107 with a 151 ISO, and they run a bunch. So the Guardians are not a team we've discussed often on this show for good reason, because they've been pretty awful from a batting perspective. But I do think that they are back in the crosshairs and a team I feel okay stacking for tonight. Greinke has been getting hit pretty hard by lefties, specifically with a much higher ISO allowed to them. And that's good for a lot of the Guardians guys, but I like it most for Andres Gimenez. Gimenez trending up recently, much better batted ball data the past month, and much better results. He is still running. So this is not a team we've been on often, but I'm fine being on them for tonight. And between the Guardians, the Nationals, and the Padres, I feel like the Guardians and the Nationals, I think we'll have enough value here to use Snell while also stacking the Padres, getting to the guys we like in that Padres team, and Ha-Seong Kim being a key focal point of that with his low salary. So even though Snell's salary is high, I still think we can stack him with his teammates for tonight. Let's go now to things to watch. If not for the repeat matchup and the weather, I would be down to consider Pablo Lopez and George Kirby tonight. They did just face these teams last week, though. Kirby facing the Twins, Lopez against the Mariners, and both guys pitched well. But again, familiarity does matter quite a bit, and it's super hot in Minneapolis, 92 degrees. It's not advantageous enough where I'm going to stack against them, obviously. We're not going that far with the weather, but I do think it's worthwhile to push them down a peg or two as a result of familiarity and weather. I don't really want to stack the Giants tonight because it is pretty warm out east, and it's never warm in San Francisco, but they're facing Ken Waldichuk. Waldichuk lets up a lot of hard contact, walks a lot of guys. So I think they're at least viable, and I'm good being on them for tonight, despite the fact there are pretty big downsides in going there. Finally, Owen White is likely starting for the Rangers tonight. He's facing the Astros if he does, and I thought they would get Yordan Alvarez back last night, but sounds like it'll be either today or tomorrow instead, which is a little bit concerning, I guess, personally. But if Alvarez is back, I would upgrade the Astros and potentially consider stacking them. If he's not back, they're okay for one-offs, but not a ton of appeal beyond that. Alvarez does make a big difference for this Astros team, so consider that when deciding whether or not to stack against White for tonight. Let's finish up here. The dinger calls for today. The boring one, Fernando Tatis Jr. facing off with Rich Hill. Tatis obliterates most pitchers, but especially lefties. So getting him against the lefty, I think we got to go there. So Fernando Tatis Jr. is the boring home run call for tonight on this Dinger Tuesday. The fun one, let's go Stone Garrett. Stone Garrett facing off again against the lefty. Doesn't leave the game early, so even if we don't get a home run early on, we could get a chance later. Again, third consecutive day with a Nationals batter in the Dinger calls, but Lane Thomas came through. Jamer Candelario came through last night too. So try to go 3 for 3. Three-peat here with Stone Garrett as a fun home run call. So the Dinger Tuesday home run calls here on the solo shot are Fernando Tatis Jr. and Stone Garrett. That's what we got here for today on the solo shot. As mentioned, we are back here on the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed later on today to break down the 3M Open for PGA DFS with myself and Brandon Gadula. Make sure you're subscribed to the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed to get that as it goes up. If you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And again, check out FanDuel.com/research. Check out FanDuel Research. Again, all the same content there. Value plays, MLB betting guides, MLB DFS helpers, all that over now on FanDuel Research. Projections still in the same place. So check it out. I think it's a great site. Pretty big fan of the new design the guys and gals cooked up over at FanDuel. So would check it out. Would recommend. It is a fantastic, I think, new place for all of your Number Fire content. If you've got any questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow FanDuel Research at FanDuel Research. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow. This has been the solo shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.